and I would like to introduce our next speaker. I'm happy to introduce her. She's the first real speaker, the external speaker, not a symmetry speaker. She describes herself as a translator and a connector of dots in the fast-moving and complex landscape of artificial intelligence. She has more than 20 years of experience with building bridges between data-fueled technologies and business value in corporates and startups. She has 2 master's degrees in biophysics and in applied mathematics. And in her spare time, she has started studying law. She also holds a handful of positions in different tech companies. So please give a warm hand and a big welcome to Elin Hauge. Thank you.
I very often get the question, so Elin, when do you think we will have artificial general intelligence? Until recently, my answer has been, that's not going to happen anytime soon. However, the question of whether we are going to have players claiming that they have reached artificial general intelligence is no longer really a question about technological development. It's a question of money and power. In the agreement between OpenAI and Microsoft, AGI is defined as $100 billion in profit. It is no longer really a question of technological development, but about the power to define. And, well, last year I thought, well, maybe I'm going out of fashion. Maybe this hype will slow down. It should. And then Trump took position, and his Silicon Valley friends are on the roll. But what we need to talk about, and what you need to discuss within your companies, is that when we talk about artificial intelligence, it is really about mathematics. Anybody with a couple of years of maths at university level can do these algorithms with pencil and paper if the data set is just very, very small. But the trouble is, of course, that most of these, or all of these data sets are enormously large. But it is about mathematics, not magic. And we need to remember that although generative AI has been all the hype over the last at least year, a bit more, this toolbox is so much bigger. So when we hear voices in media talking about generative AI as if it is all of AI, we need to remember that that is not correct. The AI toolbox contains a whole lot of different tools and methods. And really, when I worked in the tech consulting industry quite a few years ago, let's say 17, 18-ish, so 2017, not the age of 17, right? We talked about tools from IBM, and IBM had launched apps online where you could upload all your images, and magically they would tag all your images, whether it's a cat or a car or yourself or a friend. Do you remember? You remember? And we were all like, wow. And now how many of you are wow now? No, but because you're not, because your smartphones does this just by default. And over the last, I would claim at least decade, but let's say at least a handful of years, we talked a lot about prediction models across industries. I think the oil and gas sector has been quite ahead of the pack. Using prediction models in maintenance, for example, and in also deciding which wells to drill. We've been doing this for a long time. The insurance industry has been doing this for 200 years. They just didn't use machine learning. And now we have the ability to generate as well. And that is simply because we have enough data power, we have enough data, and we have the tools and methods to not just interpret and predict, but also to create. That's why we call it generative AI. But let's just connect the dots a bit. So when I started my career in insurance, that's a bit more than, well, let's say 2 decades ago, we worked on big data projects, warehouse projects. How many of you have been doing that? I mean, some of you are old enough to have been doing that. right? Sorry, the light is a bit bright. So how many of you have been working on big data and warehouse projects at some point? Oh yeah, but come on. This is an exercise for the rest of the day. Have you? Yes, you have. Okay, hands up. Can you try? Hands up. Hands up. Right? Did you reap the value of those projects? The answer is usually, maybe a little bit, not quite. Okay, let's just agree that we worked on it, and we've been working on it for a long time. Over the last decade, all of you have been working on digital transformation. There is not one company out there that has not worked on digital transformation over the last decade, right? So that means that we have the data, we have the digital processes and systems. Now it makes sense to use mathematical algorithms to make more sense out of those data and those processes, and you are all here because that is your passion. And then we call it artificial intelligence, and a lot of leaders out there get really, really scared because they lose track of what we're really talking about. But it is about applying mathematical algorithms to the large amounts of data and the digital processes that we already have. It's not magic, it's mathematics, and quite a bit of software. Let's add that. Apologies. Early morning. Is it good that this is a warm-up session? All good. You can have more coffee later, don't worry. Okay, so when ChatGPT was launched about 2.5 years ago, that wasn't really a paradigm shift for the AI experts or academics in the market, because their paradigm shift came a bit before with GPT-3. But what happened when GPT or ChatGPT was launched was that it was, in a sense, a social paradigm shift, because all the people up here in the library and out there suddenly realized that, oh, this AI thing actually works, and it's scaringly good. You remember all the first headlines about these machines telling you, there was a journalist, and the machine told him that you should get the divorce? Remember? And the world was like, wow, these machines, they must have feelings because they're so good at talking about love. Okay, reality check. Which topic out there in history has there been written most books about? Love! Okay, and then these machines are trained on all available literature out there and all unavailable literature as well. So what do you think they're really, really good at? Love, right? But that is so hard for people to understand. And also, so when I worked in the insurance industry, the saying was that unless data are structured, we cannot use them for analytical purposes. But that no longer holds true, because these, I would call them semantic probabilistic information models. That's a long word, but I'm pretty sure that you guys are able to say this, right? Just practice. Let's do it together. Semantic probabilistic information models. We try one more time. It's a good warm-up session for the morning. Let's do it. Semantic probabilistic information models. You're going to wake up when you go to sleep and you slept for a few hours. You're going to wake up and say, probabilistic information models. Oh yeah, I learned something. Okay, so back to what actually happened here. We are now able to use mathematics to make sense out of these unstructured data. But for most people out there, languages are so tightly connected to who we are, our personalities, our backgrounds, our histories, that even just thinking about using maths to decipher that feels very, very foreign. And that is the biggest challenge we're now facing, because most people out there do not understand that these things are actually semantic probabilistic information models. They think they have feelings, they do not, right? But last week, we also saw OpenAI launching GPT-4o with what expected? The next level of image creation. They are now so good that it's almost impossible to, at least with just the human eye, see whether it is fake or not. Okay, if you have seen many of these, you can say, yeah, but still there's something wrong down here. Yeah, okay. We agree on that. But the next iteration will be even better. And the next will be even better. And it's not just OpenAI. There are several of these providers, like Alibaba. Let's not forget the Chinese providers. They're at least as good at these. Now, I'm a Michael Escher fan, for those of you who know a little bit of mathematics and drawing. You might even recognize these patterns because they're similar to what he does. And it's just amazingly good. Right? So we are now at a level where we can use these machines to generate language, images, but also sound, and any type of data, to a very, very realistic level. So what does this mean for your industry? Well, you're here because you're obsessed with data and modeling of buildings, right? But let me just remind you of a couple of providers in the market in your industry who are actually using AI. Let's do former Spacemaker first. Norwegian company. They started many years ago using AI for optimization of the construction, right? Autodesk even bought them. That was as good as they were, right? They're really, really good. I'm sure many of you have been using this tool as well. But let me also point out layout, because you know, Spacemaker did this on the outside, so the outside of the building, or the exterior of the building and the surroundings. But layout is also a Norwegian startup, and they're doing the same on the inside for optimization of the interiors of a building, also for redesign, not just the first design, but for redesign. And that could be anything from how you design the layout to how you redo ventilation, and anything in between. You know this game better than I do. But this was just a reminder that we're already using a big part of this AI toolbox in your industry. And most people out there do not have this mindset that you guys have, because you know that you can model assets like buildings with a whole lot of different data. There are other industries also doing this, such as offshore. They do digital models of the wells before they start drilling to calculate, should we even do this? Automotive industry, like any car is now by definition a computer, is full of data and sensors and compute power. But other industries are also following suit. But you're in a prime position because you have this mindset. And I know that you're already working on augmented reality and virtual reality in BIM. But let's just add a few layers of AI into this. So we can then add object recognition, gesture recognition, voice recognition to these capabilities. These are directly connected to using AR. But also dynamic simulations. And with the ability to use language models with other AI capabilities, we have a whole new landscape of simulation opportunities. Also within BIM and, let's say, just buildings in general. Spatial capabilities is kind of the next level of imaging and video generation, because some of you tested Sora, or at least seen clips of Sora, and you see these gymnasts, they do vaults, and you see all their limbs go all like twisted and weird, because the video generation capabilities are not still able to model those 3D physical parameters that we humans take for granted. The algorithms are not there yet, but that's definitely under development. That goes under spatial capabilities. So really, it's about the ability to model in 3 dimensions. Let's add time, 4 dimensions. I know that resource optimization is really your game, as a lot of the reasons why you are in this BIM domain in the first place. But that has also always been at the core of what AI is. And actually, if you go back before the AI term was coined, so let's go back to Second World War, the Brits were really, really good at using mathematics to optimize their logistics operation in the field. They used maths to optimize their military operations. This discipline was then termed operational research. And that is what my applied master's is really about. But we can't talk about operational research in Norway because most people don't understand. But it is really about the mathematics involved in any kind of value chain optimization. And a lot of the maths we have there, we're still using in the AI toolbox. It's just that instead of using conventional statistical modeling, we're using machine learning. And there's more to the AI toolbox than just machine learning. Yes, we agree on that, but that's another talk. We're not spending time on that today. Very often when I meet leaders, and I work across Europe, across industries, I meet thousands of leaders every year. And when we start discussing, what's your strategy for using AI? Very often, we go quickly into, oh, but yeah, we're talking about buying ChatGPT licenses, or maybe we should use Claude. I'm like, okay, we're in Dijkman. It's a wonderful place on a personal level. I mean, you can borrow books here, but really, majority of activity here is something else, right? For those of you who haven't been around, you should go peek around the corners here because there's so much going on. And on an individual level, personal level, this is a fascinating, inspiring place to be. But really, I wouldn't recommend any of you to take your corporate strategy and put them in the shelves here. Right? You get my point? This personal productivity tools is similar, right? This is about the individual using tools. It could have been the office suite. It's just that's a bit old-fashioned, but it's there, right? But nobody would base their corporate strategy on Excel. They would use Excel to get the numbers, yes? And most companies would suffer if you took away their Excel. But their corporate strategy is not about Excel. Can we agree on that? Yes, exactly, right? So these tools that we hear about in media, so let's see, this is ChatGPT from OpenAI, this is Perplexity, and now I always mix these up. There's Claude and Gemini, and then we have Copilot. They are tools more or less useful for various purposes. We can debate those. But the point is that those are personal tools. On an enterprise level, that discussion is irrelevant, just like the Dijkman library is irrelevant in a corporate discussion about the future, unless you, of course, constructed this building. What companies need to talk about is how you're going to use these large language models, in particular, we call them foundation models, as foundations for the solutions to the problems that you need to solve. Right? You're in the construction industry. You know very well that if you're going to build a new building, you need a foundation, right? Whichever way you go about it, you need a foundation. But that foundation is not going to keep you warm or dry, is also not going to house any books. Because on top of that foundation, you need to build those buildings that are relevant for your purposes. Agreed? It's the same thing with these large language models as foundation models. They are just the foundations, but on top of those, you need to build those solutions that are relevant for your problems, your business, your clients. Okay, you get the difference? The challenge, though, for a lot of leaders, not to mention the boards, is that this discussion is complicated. It requires quite a bit of competence. You need to understand data. You need to understand the data pipeline. You need to understand your processes. You need to understand your problems. It's so much more complicated than just buying a license for ChatGPT. And then in this frenzy to automate, it's also easy to forget the human factor. How many of you are using these apps like old Order, now called Favorite, and there are a few others as well, where you can use a QR code when you're in a restaurant to order your meal? How many of you love those? They had a massive growth during COVID. And then it seems to me from the outside like they thought that that growth was just going to continue because people were like, wow, maybe they forgot about COVID. But the thing is that most of us, when we go to a restaurant, if it's a nice restaurant, like takeout is different, like festival food is different, let's just agree on that. But if you go to a nice restaurant, do you want yourself and all your guests to be stuck here to order the food? Actually, I was in a restaurant in Amsterdam, and not just did I have to have this QR code app here, I was alone, so it didn't matter that much, but also the food was served by a bot. I asked the guy serving, pretending to serve, I don't know what he was doing, can I order from you? No. But I don't want to use the app, sorry. In this frenzy to automate, do not forget the importance of the human factor, the human expertise, as valid is in your businesses as they are in the restaurant business. And with that, also remember data quality. I know that you're obsessed with data quality as well. We had some interesting discussions over dinner yesterday about the data quality in BIM. I do realize that not all carpenters want to use something digital and they rather want to use pencil and paper. Yeah, we agree on that. But the thing is that if you're going to use AI or any kind of algorithm on your data, if you have crap in, you're going to have crap on steroids out, right? So just remind them of that. And also, it's an important thing. Keep in mind that the data that you have in your business and the data that you generate through your operations, they are really, really worth a fortune because players like OpenAI and Meta and all the other LLM providers, I was about to say stealing, that was unfair. They are borrowing all the data out there on the internet, anything they can get their hands on. But the problem is that the internet is now filling up with AI slop, and about half of the data now synthetic. And that's of less value to these models because they can't really use them in the same way as they can with authentic data to train new models, which means they are willing to buy your data for a lot of money. So keep your data well protected. They are a gold mine. So talking about that, remember then what I also said about training these algorithms on large amounts of data. We talk a lot about bias. And very often the discussion about bias is related to gender or age or ethnicity. And yes, those are societal issues. When we talk about buildings, it might be easy to say, yeah, well, bias doesn't exist here, it's a building. But then you need to remember that bias only really tells you that there is a skewedness in your data. There will always be bias in your data because you will never have a situation where your data set represents the entire world. And unfortunately, the world isn't fair, right? So you will always have some kind of skewedness in your data set. Let's say you have a data set representing 100 commercial buildings, 99 commercial buildings, and 1 hospital. And then somehow you train some model that you're going to use for some design on that data set, but your next project is a hospital. Do you think that that model is going to give you the most valuable inputs? Probably not. It's probably going to recommend that you have coffee machines on all corners in your hospital, because that is what it has learned, and that is the point, right? You need to always remember that these models, whatever kind of model, only represents the world as it was. The world as it was. If you want a different world, you need to control those models and those algorithms to make sure that they actually give you an output that represents the world as you want it. And I know that many of you work in creative roles. You might want to bring in a bit of your own expertise and not just relying on what has happened. But there's one additional problem to that. And I know that many of you work on, let's call them really innovative projects. You're testing out new tools, new methods, new ways of doing things. Haven't been tried before, maybe you're taking a bit of risk. It went well on year 1, data went into the model, then year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, oh, year 5, something happened. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But you already fed that project into your data set. And in the data set, that project comes across as a success. And the challenge is that when you fed all those successes into the training data, no matter if that project at some point proves to be a failure, you cannot make the model unsee those successes. You cannot untrain a model on the data it has seen. You will have to go back to scratch, scrap the training data, and start all over again. That goes for all AI models. I also get a question, so when we have all these models and the tools and you use them to help you, then what happens to the business models? Well, I'm quite involved in the legal industry. I started studying law. It's pure interest and a bit of necessity. And in the consulting industry as well, we have these pyramids, right? You have one partner on the top and you have a whole lot of slaves at the bottom. Sorry, anybody working in the... Okay. I've been there too, right? But the challenge now is that this pyramid is becoming more and more narrow, which means that the time and material models are significantly challenged. And I've been in board discussions where the owner of the company says, yeah, but can't we just charge the hours that the AI spends? It's like, you can try, but your customers are going to figure out that is what you're doing, and then they're going to go to somebody else who has a bit more innovative perspective on this. So the whole time and material model is really challenged by this because the pyramid is going to become, well, more like a rectangular thing. But what you should also then realize is that when we have all these tools, remember big data, digital processes, and we have all this maths to do this better and to automate, the next competitive advantage will be process excellence. It's about how low can you reduce your process costs and how good can you become in delivering your services. And then you see, the additional part in that is the expertise that you as humans bring into this. So the future competitive advantage will be a combination of process excellence and human expertise. That will challenge how you price your services, indeed. I know that many of you also work on constructions that are of confidential nature. And actually, if we are honest with ourselves, all businesses have information that malign players out there would like to get their hands on. Now, cybersecurity has always been a big issue. Now, how many of you rely on somebody with a cybersecurity responsibility in your company? Let's try this exercise again. Right. And you haven't learned to know me well enough because that was a trick question. You cannot rely on your security officer because you are the weakest links. Remember what I said about GPT 4.0. With imaging generation capabilities so good that we are no longer really able to see, is this fake or is it real? And we will see that across all data types, across all industries. You will be fooled, and many of you are prime targets. Well, and then if we just return very quickly to this semantic information probability models, that's a long word. Let's just do language models, right? Prompting, jailbreaking, even if you put guardrails around these models, it's possible to bypass those guardrails. So you can say, oh, but they should have put guardrails on. Yeah, but somebody will be able to bypass those. is just the nature of probabilistic machines. You can bypass them. And then we will have scamming and phishing on steroids. You will be fooled by deepfakes. But there's one more thing, and that's the pollution of data. Because these models depend on the training data that you feed them. Beware of what kind of data they train on. Because somebody might just have polluted those data with the purpose of disrupting your models. There are big PR companies out there being paid to do this legitimately, to remove traces of things that shouldn't be out in the open, right? Let's just call it fake news on business steroids. But let me give you a couple of examples. Alibaba, as I said, just also launched their new imaging model, 2.1. It was so good that almost like within 24 hours, the porn industry grabbed it and they made it into like a big success. Like the porn industry is always ahead, right? But then with Sora, so the OpenAI model, also with GPT-4o, they now created like fake body cam videos. Now imagine a world, in particular in the US, where you can fake body cam videos. Oh, goodness. Shall we go home now? Red wine, anyone? But this one, I mean, this is maybe the best one. This is fake. Now, how many of you are friends with your accountants? How many of you come to your accountant with like a staple of travel expenses? Yeah, right, yeah. And or maybe you've thrown away the paper and you've just taken a photo of it. How much is that photo worth now? Okay, so we don't have the solutions to these, right? And let's just add that the US is stepping down their operations on Russian cybercrime, right? The world is a dangerous place right now. And let me just also quote the CIO of Posten. The scariest thing isn't the attacks that you discover. The scariest thing is that you don't discover them because they are there. They're listening to your business. Also, in this game, we need to remember that digital isn't necessarily sustainable. I know that many of you are involved in sustainability projects. Then it's easy to turn to technology because that will solve our sustainability problems. Yeah, and it creates a whole lot of new ones. Water for cooling, electricity for compute. These two are actually very good reasons why circularity should be a even bigger part of data center industry. But then it's also about mining for minerals, because we need precious minerals to create these and all the gadgets that you all have in your pockets and purses and all. I have a drawer at home. It's my bad conscience drawer. How many of you have a drawer like that? Mine is full. Digital isn't sustainable per se. It depends on the choices you make, actually, of providers, data centers, open source versus proprietary, big models, small models, the need for compute power. This is rather complicated. So, to close off with one important topic. I am often invited to talk about AI to augment humans, because in the management jargon, you don't want to use AI to replace humans, so we just say let's augment the humans with a bit of AI. Right? Sounds better? I wish it was that simple. Because in many instances, AI actually proves to be better than humans, because we humans are consistently bad at making decisions. How many of you have read the book Noise by Daniel Kahneman? No, you should do, actually, because he points out how systematically bad we are at making decisions. The insurance industry is one such example. And like, let's say we're going to do an insurance for this building. That is not done by an algorithm. It's usually done by humans using algorithms and a lot of human capacity. But if you ask 3 different underwriters, they're going to come up with 3 different prices and risk assessments. We are consistently bad at making those decisions. And that is where AI, let's just call it maths, right, in this context. Maths is systematically better than humans in making these decisions. But another part of this is that relying on AI tends to kill our ability for critical thinking. And this is a huge problem when we start using these tools for junior resources, like developers, like designers. When they start using these tools to a large extent very early on, they don't have the expertise to do the critical thinking. And then that's just going to exacerbate their inability to do critical thinking. And not just that, but if they use AI to make decisions somehow, and they rely on it, the AI in itself is going to make them more biased in their decisions. There are positive synergies, though, and this is what I want you to take away. If you just remember one thing from my session, remember this. There are positive synergies between humans and AI when the human is already an expert. So to summarize, AI is the natural next step. It's not a hype that's going to disappear per se, but the financial hype is hopefully going to die down. But the tools and the maths is still here. It's not going to disappear. But AI also raises the bar on human knowledge. The best examples, as I said, are when AI is used by human experts. And then AI is a toolbox and is much bigger than generative AI. But just like any toolbox, and I have a very physical toolbox at home, in that toolbox I have a hammer. Now I can use that hammer to kill my neighbor's cat, or I can use it for something useful in the house. My husband will be happy with that. Whether I choose to kill the cat or use it for something useful is my choice. The hammer is still there. Whether you want to become victims or masters of the AI toolbox is up to you. There's a choice you need to make. Thank you. And let me just add one final take. It's up to us to design a future of technology that is human more, not human less.
Thank you, Elin.